Welcome back, everyone, to Hobbit Camp. This Wednesday, what's today? The 18th of July, 2018. This is session 7 on chapters 14 and 15, Fire and Water, and the Gathering of the Clouds. We're going to look again today at luck and the way that it fits in with the various leaders that we see in action in these chapters. One person we don't see in chapter 14 is the Hobbit, and that's rather interesting because he's been our main character throughout the whole story and the person that we can most connect with. He's like us, small among these great events in this big adventure, and now he's swapped out of the story. Instead, we focus on the battle with the dragon and Bard, a warrior and heroic-looking figure, which brings us to a really interesting question that's suggested for you guys to journal on, and I'd really like to hear your thoughts about this one. Why is it that when we met Gandalf in the beginning and he was choosing Bilbo to go on this adventure, Gandalf said that he couldn't find any warriors or heroes, and so he's opting instead for a burglar, right? That's sort of like one of the first questions that was asked about this story was, why does he choose Bilbo, if you remember? And it's a great question. And now we see the other side of that here. It does sort of look like there's a hero out there, and maybe more than one, but certainly Bard fits the description in his actions in this chapter. So it sort of requires us, or at least, prompts us, suggests to us that we should ask that question again. Is Bard a hero? If so, why did Gandalf bring Bilbo along, right? If there's this perfectly good hero out there, right? Another way to ask that question, I guess, how does Bard fit into this story, right? He's described as grim, many different ways in these chapters. How does that grimness fit into the way that this part of the story shifts gears? And then also we want to look at the questions about leadership, which have come up before. In this case, again, Bilbo is sort of in the background, and the other leaders are more emphasized. The Elven King, the Master of Lake Town, Bard, and of course Thorin Oakenshield. So what is it about these leaders that prevents them from coming to an agreement here? And what looks like is going to be even worse than not agreeing, they're actually going to come to blows. They're going to have a battle over this disagreement. So what's that about? So those are the big questions that we're going to look at here today. Again, if you have thoughts about them, please send them in anytime, or other questions you're interested in. I was doing some journaling here just before class, so I'm going to share that later, but I want to hear your thoughts first about the dragon slaying, the idea of how pride might play into the leader's stubbornness. Thoughts on that? I made a little drawing here, which I hope shows up okay on the screen later. I'll show you. I want to see your drawings as well. What you thought that the battle at Lake Town looks like, the attack of Smaug, the death of Smaug, Bard and his black arrow and his heroism, and of course the heroism of the birds, the thrush and the raven. Those are cool things that you might like to illustrate. As far as more hands-on activities, you can make a black arrow of your own to go with your swords and your eagles and everything else you've been making, your keys. You can check out some links that are in the program packet for more information about the inspiration for the thrush. So it's a real bird, of course, and there's some really cool images. I've got one on the slideshow to look at. And you can hear the thrush song as well, which is really cool. You might want to compare the dwarf songs and come up with more verses for those. Of course, the dwarves sang when they first got to Bilbo's house, and now they sing again, a reprise, a variation on the same song. So we'll look at that. You can have fun singing those in your best dwarf voices. And of course, one of my favorite activities, building a fort. Right, so the dwarves, they set up their wall and across the front gate. You and your friends, or whoever you're doing this with, your group, you can build your own forts, and then of course you have to sally forth from them. That's for tomorrow. All right. A grim voice. Look, said one, the lights again. Last night the watchman saw them start and fade from midnight until dawn. Something is happening up there. Perhaps the king under the mountain is forging gold, said another. It is long since he went north. It is time the songs began to prove themselves again. Which king? Said another with a grim voice. As like as not, it is the marauding fire of the dragon, the only king under the mountain we have ever known. You're always foreboding gloomy things, said the others. Anything from floods to poisoned fish. Think of something cheerful. Then suddenly, a great light appeared in the low place in the hills, and the northern end of the lake turned golden. The king beneath the mountain, they shouted. His wealth is like the sun, his silver like a fountain, his rivers golden run. The river is running gold from the mountain, they cried. And everywhere windows were opening and feet were hurrying. There was once more a tremendous excitement and enthusiasm. But the grim-voiced fellow ran hot-foot to the master. Dragon is coming or I am a fool, he cried. Cut the bridges, to arms, to arms. Right. So we see a big contrast here between the people of the town who've been singing all the songs and getting carried away by the return of the dwarves, right? When they see the lights on the mountainside, they think, okay, it's the dwarves and the king forging gold, right? And starting up these great furnaces and forges that are going to bring wealth down the river into the lake, and it's going to be great. Everything's great. Bard, as we learn his name in a minute, the grim-voiced man speaks up and says, "It's the dragon, right? That is the fire of the dragon. He is the king under the mountain, right? Not the dwarfs." And the others don't listen to him at first, right? They see the lake turn golden, just like the song said, and take that to mean that gold is going to flow down it. He sees the same thing, and he knows, or he is willing to put himself on the line, at least, and say he believes that this is a sign of danger, right? That the dragon is on his way. The interesting thing here is that the phrase "the king beneath the mountain," right, can refer to either one. And the lake turning gold and burning, right? We heard that in the song. That can refer to either one. It's up to how you interpret the song, right? Either the dragon or the dwarves forging their gold. Okay, maybe even both. All right, so we hear that Bard is this sort of grim person. He's made lots of prognostications. He's foretold terrible things happening before, right? So maybe that's part of why they don't listen to him. He's always crying wolf, you might say. Well, this time it turns out he's right. Then warning trumpets were suddenly sounded and echoed along the rocky shores. The cheering stopped and the joy was turned to dread. So it was that the dragon did not find them quite unprepared. Before long, so great was his speed, they could see him as a spark of fire rushing towards them and growing ever huger and more bright, and not the most foolish doubted that the prophecies had gone rather wrong. Still they had a little time. Every vessel in the town was filled with water, every warrior was armed, every arrow and dart was ready, and the bridge to the land was thrown down and destroyed before the roar of Smaug's terrible approach grew loud, and the lake rippled red as fire beneath the awful beating of his wings. Red as fire, sorry, it's a simile. Amid shrieks and wailing and the shouts of men, he came over them, swept toward the bridges, and was foiled. The bridge was gone, and his enemies were on an island in deep water, too deep and dark and cool for his liking. If he plunged into it, a vapor and a steam would arise to cover all the land with a mist for days. But the lake was mightier than he. It would quench him before he could pass through. So here's the water side of things. This is their greatest defense against the dragon, right? They throw the bridge down. They start this preparation before he arrives. That drawbridge or whatever it was that led between the town on the lake and the shore, they drop it into the water, right? So that makes them into an island. There's nowhere for Smaug to safely land, right, and start blowing his fire and his wind, his rushing attacks from a safe point. Right now, Smaug is vulnerable. He has to fly and stay in the air, because if he tries to land, splash into the water, that's the end of Smaug, right? So as great and strong and fiery as he is, the water is stronger. There's more of it, and it's not going anywhere, right? The people of the town gather it in preparation to throw it on the buildings, keep them moist, and keep them from catching fire as the dragon goes by. All right, so it's not a totally one-sided fight here, which might be a little bit surprising given how powerful Smaug seemed. All right, but here's his side of things: the fire. So, roaring, he swept back over the town. A hail of dark arrows leaped up and snapped and rattled on his scales and jewels, and their shafts fell back, kindled by his breath, burning and hissing into the lake. No fireworks you ever imagined equaled the sights that night. At the twanging of the bows and the shrilling of the trumpets, the dragon's wrath blazed to its height, till he was blind and mad with it. No one had dared to give battle to him for many an age, nor would they have dared now, if it had not been for the grim-voiced man, Bard was his name, who ran to and fro, cheering on the archers, and urging the master to order them to fight to the last arrow. Fire leaped from the dragon's jaws. He circled for a while high in the air above them, lighting all the lake. The trees by the shores shone like copper and like blood, with leaping shadows of dense black at their feet. Then down he swooped straight through the arrow storm, reckless in his rage, taking no heed to turn his scaly sides towards his foes, seeking only to set their town ablaze. So such strong imagery here of the battle. And you can imagine, right? Start by imagining something that you might have seen in real life, like fireworks, right? And then the narrator tells us it's even more spectacular than that, right? So take this thing that you know about and multiply it and go beyond it. Go past anything that you've ever experienced to get a sense of what this is like. That's kind of like what he was describing earlier. Remember when Bilbo saw the treasure, it was beyond words. There are no words for this. It's kind of like that here. The mention of fireworks now. Who does fireworks make you think of? That's kind of an interesting choice that the narrator makes here. Who's associated with fireworks right back at the beginning of the story? Well, send in your thoughts there. Now, there's a lot of leaping going on, right? So there's this kind of like rushing and swiftness and speed to the battle. You can imagine the flight of the dragon, the flight of the arrows, and how they're battling here. And finally, we get Bard's name, right? So he's singled out. So in all this mayhem, it's a battle really between this leader of the people, Bard, although he goes through the master. He's the one encouraging them. It's him versus Smaug, right? The name Bard is kind of interesting because it's a word that means someone who sings or tells stories. That's what the literal meaning of that word is. So it's kind of neat that that's the name he's given. He, of course, is going to be the person that they sing about later, down in history. He'll go down as the great dragon slayer. Now, more similes here. The trees on the shore are shining like copper and like blood, right? So we get, again, that connection between precious metals, shiny things, and violence, fire and blood and danger. Those are connected here, so that's kind of neat. I'm not getting any takers on my fireworks question. I'll tell you who it made me think of. Gandalf. Gandalf. Right, so we were asking at the end of last chapter, where's the dragon? Right, well, now we find out where the dragon was. But we might also be wondering, so where in the world is Gandalf? Where's he been? What's he doing? Anyway, okay, so just another little question to think about. So water and fire. Fire is prevailing right now, is in the ascendant, is triumphing. But then, all right, as everyone's diving in the water to escape, there was still a company of archers that held their ground among the burning houses. Their captain was Bard, grim-voiced and grim-faced, whose friends had accused him of prophesying floods and poisoned fish, though they knew his worth and courage. He was a descendant in long line of Girion, Lord of Dale, whose wife and child had escaped down the running river from the ruin long ago. Now he shot with a great yew bow, till all his arrows but one were spent. The flames were near him, his companions were leaving him. He bent his bow for the last time. Suddenly out of the dark something fluttered to his shoulder. He started, but it was only an old thrush. Unafraid it perched by his ear and brought him news. Marveling, he found he could understand its tongue, for he was of the race of Dale. Wait, wait, it said to him. The moon is rising. Look for the hollow of the left breast as he flies and turns above you. And while Bard paused in wonder, it told him of tidings up in the mountain and of all that it had heard. So what is the thrush? What is the thrush's news that it brings to Bard? What has the thrush heard? And who did he hear it from? We saw this in the last chapter. It was actually annoying to Bilbo. Remember, Bilbo even threw a rock at the thrush because it was bothering him that it seemed to be listening to his news. Little did he know, right? This is turning out for the best. Not for the first time, right? The thrush has played a really important role already in this story. The thrush was cracking the snails, and here's a picture of that. I wanted to show you guys. This is the one that is linked to in your program packet. It's really, really neat. The bright eye, the snail shell in its beak. Little tiny bird, but mighty, right? It overheard Bilbo's news about the weak spot on the dragon's underbelly, right? That's where dragons are weak, if you listen to the old stories. And that's where Smaug has a chink in his armor that he doesn't know about. Now, the thrush was already important even before that because it was cracking the snails just like the secret moon runes on the map had told them that it would. That's what reminds Bilbo of the secret of the keyhole. Remember, so kind of like Bilbo is a small and unassuming. He doesn't seem very mighty or strong. He's a small character, and yet he's crucial. He's important. It's sort of like that too with the bird here. The thrush brings the news that saves Bard, and that is the undoing of the dragon, right? So sends the black arrow through the weak spot. Before he does, he speaks to the arrow. All right. So a couple interesting things there. He can understand the thrush's language, right? That's rather strange. Now, he's also got this arrow. Arrow, said the bowman, black arrow, I have saved you to the last. You have never failed me, and always I have recovered you. I had you from my father, and he from old. If ever you came from the forges of the true king under the mountain, go now and speed well. The dragon swooped once more, lower than ever, and as he turned and dived down, his belly glittered white with sparkling fires of gems in the moon, but not in one place. The great bow twanged. The black arrow sped straight from the string, straight for the hollow by the left breast, where the foreleg was flung wide. In it smote and vanished, barb, shaft, and feather, so fierce was its flight. With a shriek that deafened men, felled trees, and split stone, Smaug shot spouting into the air, turned over, and crashed down from on high in ruin. Full on the town he fell. His last throws splintered it to sparks and gleeds. The lake roared in. A vast steam leapt up, white in the sudden dark under the moon. There was a hiss, a gushing whirl, and then silence. And that was the end of Smaug and Esgaroth, but not of Bard. Great, great death by the dragon here, a dramatic death, right? Swooping in lower than ever. Right, so that's the first thing that you might notice about how Smaug is defeated. It's his own arrogance, right? His own pride and his own sense of his strength and invulnerability. He thinks he is invincible. He fears nothing, and all he's thinking about is destroying his enemies, right? How dare they fight back against Smaug? That's what is enraging him so much. So even though their arrows hardly touch him up to this point, he is completely enraged and furious, right? So not thinking that there's any possibility of him being hurt, much less being defeated in this struggle, right? He started out knowing that he is vulnerable, right, to the water, but that seems to have left his mind entirely here. All right, so that's one thing. He flies in super low, right, and that brings this this bare spot into view and into bow range for Bard, right? So then the second thing, Bard has got this special arrow that he believes in, right? Why does he believe in this arrow? Why is it special? So we hear that it came from the forges of the true king under the mountain. Okay, so it's like those weapons that the dwarves found back in the troll cave that came from the elves. So it's got this ancient history to it. This didn't come from elves, though. This arrow came from the true king under the mountain. Thorin's grandfathers made this weapon, his grandsires, his ancestors. They made this weapon, right? So it has got some kind of element of their revenge, perhaps. Whether you think that it's actually magical, like the elf swords seem to be, right? They glow when there's goblins around, when there's enemies. This arrow doesn't seem to glow exactly. It's black. It's got that kind of cold vengeance associated with it, and that kind of fits, right? Because the weak spot on the dragon is also a black point. It's where there's nothing shining in the moon. There's no jewels there. It's open. It's empty. So the black arrow, sure enough, it's his one last shot, and it goes straight to the one spot that the dragon is vulnerable. So that's the second thing, right? But he wouldn't know about that if it wasn't for the thrush. And he wouldn't be able to understand the thrush's words if he wasn't who he is. He is the descendant of the Lord of Dale, that city that made such beautiful toys. Remember back in the old days when the dwarves were in their forges and gold flowed down the river, right? So Bard, like Bilbo, has some famous ancestors, like Thorin. He is a descendant of kings. Okay, and so apparently, in Bilbo's case, it seems to give him incredible luck, right, and a certain adventurous side, as well as a very stable side. That's what he inherits from his ancestors. In Thorin's case, he inherited this quest, right, this revenge, and to get the gold back and his kingdom back, right. In Bard's case, what he seems to have inherited is an incredible ability to understand the language of the birds, and that's pretty special, right? We know that Tolkien is interested in language. That's his big inspiration for a lot of what he does, is his studies of language and legend and myth. And so he puts a character into his story here who can understand the speech of the birds. A great fairy tale ability. It's an ability also that is associated with dragon slayers. So in old stories of um, the the rings, the ring cycle, um, these old legends of dragon slayers like Sigurd and his father Sigmund, right? That you get operas made about them and whatnot. Anyway, these tales, when Sigurd kills the dragon and its blood flows out, he suddenly can hear and understand the speech of nature, of the birds. And so that idea that killing a dragon is connected with understanding and being in touch with the whole world, right? All the speech of animals. That's really an old idea. So there's something really special about Bard. Even before he kills the dragon, he has this kind of heroic ability, this skill to understand the speech of the birds. All right. Also kind of interesting here, right? Smaug and Esgroth, the lake town, the old name for it, both fall into the water. That's the end of them. So when Smaug goes down, so does Lake Town. That's kind of interesting, right? Because it was built when Smaug came into the mountain and took over. So in some sense, they're kind of connected here. They both sink. Not the end of Bard, right? So we know that he survives. Okay. The people on shore who've escaped think that he is dead. They're thinking about how they would have made him king, and the master's like, oh well, too bad that he's gone. Right? And then Bard shows up. Oh, okay. So hi, King Bard. Okay. So there's this kind of conflict now. So who's in charge, right? We will have King Bard, said the people near at hand shouted in reply. We have had enough of the old men and the money counters. And people further off took up the cry, up the bowmen and down with money bags, till the clamor echoed along the shore. I am the last man to undervalue Bard the bowman, said the master warily, for Bard now stood rather close beside him. He has tonight earned an eminent place in the roll of the benefactors of our town, and he is worthy of many imperishable songs. Right, so there's the bard, right, the singer, and his name is going to be in the songs. Okay, but why, O people? And here the master rose to his feet and spoke very loud and clear. Why do I get all your blame? For what fault am I to be deposed? Who aroused the dragon from his slumber, I might ask? Who obtained of us rich gifts and ample help, and led us to believe that old songs could come true? Who played on our soft hearts and our pleasant fancies? What sort of gold have they sent down the river to reward us? Dragon fire and ruin. From whom should we claim recompense of our damage and aid for our widows and orphans? It's talking about the dwarves, of course, right? Thorin and company. So the master is still a crafty one here, right? Wary and crafty, right? He's got the gift of gab, this master. He might not be brave, right? He's actually kind of a coward, we find out. He left rather early in the battle. But he is quite clever and quite a good speaker. He takes the people's excitement. They're cheering for Bard. They want to make him king. And he redirects their anger towards him and sends it off towards the dwarves instead, right? He blames the dwarves. All right, so that's the master's technique here. Bard's approach is a little different, right? Bard is a man of action, a man of few words. In a sense, his actions speak for themselves. So he's that sort of leader. He's an active leader, a warlike and brave leader. So in a sense, an older kind of idea of what a leader should be. And the master represents this kind of more modern, we trade, we settle our disputes with money and with words and not with fists or bows and arrows, right? The people here seem to want to go back to that way of the old city of Dale, right, ruled by its kings, and Bard is descended from them. And the master's like, well, let's think about this, right? Like, let's slow down here. Let's not get carried away, right? So I think, to be fair, I think they both have got a point here, and Bard himself chooses in this moment not to press his title of king. He's going to say, well, I will submit, I will serve the master for now, right? I might go rebuild my city later, but for now, he takes charge, but is still serving the master as he organizes everybody, gets them set up to survive what looks like it's going to be a tough. They've survived the dragon fight, right? But now they have to deal with the elements, with nature. It's cold, winter's coming. All of their things are at the bottom of the lake. So what are they going to do, right? Widows and orphans, so that many of the men have died who could otherwise help provide and do some of this work. So they're in a bad shape, and they need to be unified right now. So Bard, I think, does what a good leader would actually do, right? He humbles himself to maintain the unity of the group, which is good, which is all they can do. So this is Bard's response, right? Fools, why waste words and wrath on those unhappy creatures? Doubtless they perished first in fire, before Smaug came to us. Then, even as he was speaking, the thought came into his heart of the fabled treasure of the mountain, lying without guard or owner, and he fell suddenly silent. He thought of the master's words, and of Dale rebuilt and filled with golden bells, if he could but find the men. At length he spoke again. This is no time for angry words, master, or for considering weighty plans of change. There is work to do. I serve you still, though after a while I may think again of your words, and go north with any that will follow me. Then he strode off to help in the ordering of the camps and in the care of the sick and the wounded. But the master scowled at his back as he went, and remained sitting on the ground. He thought much, but said little, unless it was to call loudly for men to bring him fire and food. Okay. So both of them are doing a lot of thinking here, right? Scheming against one another, although they're temporarily working together, it seems like. Bard assumes, which makes sense, that the dragon probably killed all the dwarves. So it makes no sense to waste their words berating and insulting the poor dwarves. They're probably all dragon food at this point, right? He's wrong about that, right? But he does this to try to, again, sort of pacify the people, calm them down, get them redirected to deal with their situation right now, right? No time for angry words. It's time to rebuild, right? To take care of everyone. Now, on the other hand, underneath that thought, he has something that he doesn't say. This secret thought in his heart. He's thinking of the treasure, right? If the dwarves are gone and the dragon's gone, there's all that treasure under the mountain with nobody to enjoy it, right? With nobody to use it and to wonder at its beauty, right? And what is treasure good for anyway? That's kind of Bilbo's question here, right? So we shouldn't forget that. But on the other hand, it's good for lots of things. You can buy a lot of stuff with it. You can become a great king by giving it to other people and making wonderful things and rebuilding the city, right? So there's lots of good that can come out of this treasure if someone like Bard can get his hands on it. That's what he's thinking. Yeah, so not entirely greedy, I don't think, but there is something here about his own importance, right? He'll be a great king if he can get that treasure. It's there for the taking. He's not the only one who has this thought, right? The Elven King is on the move too. So this is the Elven King. When he received the prayers of Bard, had pity, for he was the lord of a good and kindly people. So turning his march, which had at first been direct towards the mountain, he hastened now down the river to the Long Lake. Okay, so a little background there. The Elven King had also heard from the birds, from his spies, that the dragon has been slain, that the treasure is open for the taking, and so the Elven King had set out with his people to go and claim the treasure, or at least, deal with it in some kind of way. But this is important that the Elven King hears now that Bard has sent messengers. They need help down in the lake. And so the Elven King considers that to be more important than the treasure, right? Bard agrees, right? He deals with his people first before going and trying to get the treasure. So both of them are leaders who care about the good of their people. And the Elven King, maybe even more so, he cares about even people who are not his responsibility, right? He has pity, the mark of a generous heart, right? So he goes and helps them. Their plans were soon made, picking up a little later. With the women and the children, the old and the unfit, the master remained behind, and with him were some men of crafts and many skilled elves, and they busied themselves felling trees and collecting the timber sent down from the forest. Then they set about raising many huts by the shore against the oncoming winter. And also, under the master's direction, they began the planning of a new town, designed more fair and large even than before, but not in the same place. They removed northward, higher up the shore, for ever after they had a dread of the water where the dragon lay. He would never again return to his golden bed, but was stretched out cold as stone, twisted upon the floor of the shallows. There for ages his huge bones could be seen in calm weather, amid the ruined piles of the old town. But few dared to cross the cursed spot, none dared to dive into the shivering water or recover the precious stones that fell from his rotting carcass. But all of the men of arms who were still able, and the most of the Elven King's array, got ready to march north toward the mountain. It was thus that in 11 days from the ruin of the town, the head of their host passed the rock gates at the end of the lake and came into the desolate lands. The desolate lands. Remember, desolation of Smaug, right? That land, as we'll see, is going to become less desolate after Smaug is gone. But for now, there's still this kind of curse, right, hanging over things from the dragon. That curse scares people off from diving in the water and recovering all the precious stones that were crusted onto his scales, right? So no one ever goes in that spot anymore, even though there's treasure there. It's cursed. They're afraid of it, which is kind of interesting, right? So Bard was the last person to be that close to the dragon and to dive through that water and survive. So that's maybe part of why, they consider him special, right? He's a king. He's not like other people. He has been dunked in that water and come out alive. It's kind of neat. The dragon dunked in the water stays there. No more returning to his golden bed for Smaug. The teamwork here between the Elven King and Bard, I also found really interesting, right? So in this case, there isn't a conflict like there was with Bard and the Master. No one's trying to be superior here. The Elven King is clearly coming to help out another kingdom, and so they're kind of like allies here. It's not like Bard is in service of the Elven King or anything like that. They're independent and they're helping one another. Right, so that shows respect. It shows the pity of the king for the people, and again, a sort of generosity here. But they do this to then team up and go get the treasure. As Bilbo noticed, as Smaug pointed out finally, how are you going to get all this treasure home, right? Did you think about that? Did the dwarves mention that would be a problem, right? So there is sort of a practical side to this. They need a lot of people to go up there, recover the treasure, bring it out, and do something with it, right? Rebuild the city. So they need to team up for this, it sounds like. There's a practical element along with the generosity and the kindness of the kings here. Now that picture of the dragon under the water, that's what I used for my my drawing here for my journal today. I hope you guys can see this. It's like, it's really hard to see because I drew it in crayon, sorry. All right, so what you're supposed to be seeing here is the dragon. There he is. He looks kind of bird-like. Those are the bones of the dragon and the sunken pieces of the houses and the bridge, the broken bridge over here on this side. This is the little camp that they've made over here. And up in the corner over here, whoops, it's hard for me to do this. It's backwards to me. Over here's the Lonely Mountain, right? So that's my little journal drawing. I know I'm not as good of an artist as Tolkien is. We looked at his picture of the dragon horde yesterday, but I just thought that was such a cool picture. It put this picture in my head, and so I tried to draw it there. And I'm just fascinated by the idea of the bones and the carcass of the dragon being there under the water, and all those jewels and the ruins of the town. It's like this sunken treasure, you know, that no one wants to claim because they think it's cursed. Yeah, I find that really spooky and really cool. So I drew that. Anytime you guys want to send in your pictures and your drawings, please do, please do. All right, so moving into the next chapter, we do come back to Bilbo and the dwarves, and so this was like this chapter of Fire and Water is kind of stands on its own, right? It's outside of the timeline of the story. We go back in time to deal with that, and then we jump forward again to where we left off. It's kind of interesting storytelling strategy there. I think it works really, really well. And so then we come back to Bilbo and the dwarves, wondering where the dragon is, right? Before long, there was a fluttering of wings, and back came the thrush, and with him came a most decrepit old bird. He was getting blind. He could hardly fly, and the top of his head was bald. He was an aged raven of great size. He alighted stiffly on the ground before them, slowly flapped his wings, and bobbed towards Thorin. "O Thorin, son of Thrain, and Balin, son of Fundin," he croaked. And Bilbo could understand what he said, for he used ordinary language, and not bird speech. "I am Roak, son of Kark. Kark is dead, but he was well known to you once. It is 100 years and 53 since I came out of the egg, but I do not forget what my father told me. Now I am the chief of the great ravens of the mountain. We are few, but we remember still the king that was of old. Most of my people are abroad, for there are great tidings in the south. Some are tidings of joy to you, some you will not think so good." So again, the thrush listens to them talking, hears that they could understand the speech of ravens. That was Balin telling them that. And so the thrush goes off and gets the raven, and the raven comes and talks to them in their language. That's really interesting, right? So Bilbo can understand what the raven says. He's using ordinary language, right? The language of the people, the dwarves, Bilbo. Apparently they all speak the same language, which is convenient, right? Okay. And so this, yet another king, yet another leader here. This raven brings news. Smaug is dead. That's good. And an army is marching this way. Could be good, could be bad. Thorin, of course, reacts very negatively. Right? And this is what the raven thinks about that. "Your own wisdom must decide your course, but 13 is small remnant of the great folk of Durin that once dwelt here, and now are scattered far. If you will listen to my counsel, you will not trust the master of the Lakemen, but rather him that shot the dragon with his bow. Bard is he, of the race of Dale, of the line of Girion. He is a grim man, but true. We would see peace once more among dwarves and men and elves after the long desolation, but it may cost you dear in gold. I have spoken." Skipping ahead a bit, then Thorin burst forth in anger. "Our thanks, Roak, Kark's son. You and your people shall not be forgotten, but none of our gold shall thieves take or the violent carry off while we are alive. You would earn our thanks still more. Bring us news of any that draw near. Also I would beg of you, if any of you are still young and strong of wing, that you would send messengers to our kin in the mountains of the north, both west from here and east, and tell them of our plight, but goes specially to my cousin Dane in the Iron Hills, for he has many people well armed and dwells nearest to this place. Bid him hasten." "I will not say if this counsel be good or bad," croaked Roak, "but I will do what can be done." Then off he slowly flew. So again, there's a kind of ranking here between the leaders. Roak tells Thorin straight out, trust Bard, don't trust the master, right? So Bard is above the master. Bard is grim, right? He's harsh, he's a warrior, He looks at the negative side of things a lot of the time, right? But he's true, okay? You can trust him. Thorin doesn't take that recommendation, and yet, Roak will still go and do what Thorin asks him to do. So there's another superiority thing there, where Thorin is in charge. Roak, although he's also a king of the ravens and birds, he listens to what Thorin says, right? So he submits himself to Thorin and goes and is going to send messengers. A little bit of an insult there, I thought, from Thorin, right? If you have any young and strong birds, right? Okay, Thorin maybe should appreciate a little more how wise Roak is, right? How important that is, and listen to him a little better. But no, he wants young and strong birds to go and send news to his cousin to bring an army, right, to defend their treasure. So Thorin really leaps to a conclusion here, doesn't take this good suggestion from Roak, and thinks that Bard is going to come and try to steal his treasure. All right. So Thorin reacts with anger. Not only that, right, but there's this army of elves coming too. So I just found this to be a really funny little scene here. Back now to the mountain, cried Thorin. We have little time to lose. And little food to use, cried Bilbo, always practical on such points. In any case, he felt that the adventure was, properly speaking, over with the death of the dragon, in which he was much mistaken, and he would have given most of his share of the profits for the peaceful winding up of these affairs. Back to the mountain, cried the dwarves, as if they had not heard him. So back he had to go with them. So poor Bilbo, right? After all he's done on this adventure, no one listens to him either, right? The dwarves are in full dwarvish fire mode, right? Their hearts are on fire with desire for the treasure, with stubbornness and jealousy. They don't want to share it or give it to anyone. They don't want to help anyone else who's suffered from the dragon, right? Or helped them. No. They want to get back to the mountain, right? They're on a single track thinking here. Bilbo, always practical, says, we don't have much food, right? How are you going to stand up to this army if there's only 13 of you, right? That was the Raven's point. And Bilbo's point is, we don't even have much supplies. So they can easily just wait for us to run out of food, right? They don't even have to attack. And that's their plan. Siege, right? Sitting down in front of the gate and waiting. Okay, so the dwarves sent out Fili and Kili to recover some supplies. They get a little bit back, right? By that time, jumping in here, they knew that the joined armies of lake men and elves were hurrying toward the mountain. But now their hopes were higher, for they had food for some weeks. Wow, whole weeks of time. Wow, great. Really thinking ahead. Chiefly cram, of course, but they were very tired of it, but cram is much better than nothing. And already the gate was blocked with a wall of squared stones laid dry, but very thick and high across the opening. There were holes in the wall through which they could see or shoot, but no entrance. They climbed in or out with ladders and hauled stuff up with ropes. For the issuing of the stream, they had contrived a small low arch under the new wall, but near the entrance they had so altered the narrow bed that a wide pool stretched from the mountain wall to the head of the fall over which the stream went towards Dale. Approach to the gate was now only possible, without swimming, along a narrow ledge of the cliff to the right as one looked outwards from the wall. The ponies they had brought only to the head of the steps above the old bridge, and unloading them there had bidden them return to their masters and sent them back riderless to the south. So the dwarves are thinking really narrowly here, right? Literally, they make the gateway impossible to walk through. They make this little place for the water to flow out just to make a moat so they can't be attacked. They don't send any thanks for all the help that the men gave them. They just send back the ponies with no riders too, right? So again, you can really paint this picture. And if you don't like to just paint pictures, you can make your own version of this. You can build it with cardboard or something in wherever you're doing with your group. and make your own little fort here. That could be fun. The dwarves, of course, to pass the time, come back to their old song. And this is just the ending of it here. The mountain throne once more is freed. Oh, wandering folk, the summons heed. Come haste across the waste. The king of friend and kin has need. Now call we over mountains cold. Come back unto the caverns old. Here at the gates the king awaits. His hands are rich with gems and gold. The king is come into his hall. Under the mountain dark and tall. The worm of dread is slain and dead. And ever so our foes shall fall. Okay, so the song appeared to please Thorin. Right, he's thinking about how soon his friends can come to him. But Bilbo's heart fell. Both at the song and the talk, they sounded much too warlike. So what is going on here with Thorin? What is going on with the dwarves? They've taken their song, which was about getting back their kingdom, and now they turn it into a war song. They're not content with succeeding in the original adventure. They immediately shift to want more, right? They want to keep all of the treasure for themselves, not share it with anyone. They're willing to fight over it. And they say, just as the dragon, the worm of dread, had fallen, ever so our foes shall fall. This is just step one in killing all of their enemies. Whoa, okay, so that took a turn for the worse there, right? What used to be this song of remembering what had been done wrong to them in the past. Now it's a song about the future. We're gonna, hold this treasure. No one will get it from us. Right? Yikes. Okay. so much for that song. What is going on here with Thorin? What is changed? Okay. So we see a little bit here in the interaction between Bard and Thorin. The power that gold has. I am Bard, and by my hand was the dragon slain and your treasure delivered. Is that not a matter that concerns you? Moreover, I am by right descent the heir of Girion of Dale, and in your hoard is mingled much of the wealth of his halls and towns, which of old Smaug stole. Is not that a matter of which we may speak? Further, in his last battle, Smaug destroyed the dwellings of the men of Esgaroth, and I am yet the servant of their master. I would speak for him, and ask whether you have no thought for the sorrow and misery of his people. They aided you in your distress, and in recompense you have thus far brought ruin only, though doubtless undesigned. Now these were fair words and true, if proudly and grimly spoken, and Bilbo thought that Thorin would at once admit that what justice was in them. He did not, of course, expect that anyone would remember that it was he who had discovered all by himself the dragon's weak spot. And that was just as well, for no one ever did. But also he did not reckon with the power that gold has, upon which a dragon has long brooded, nor with dwarvish hearts. Long hours in the past days Thorin had spent in the treasury, and the lust of it was heavy on him, though he had hunted chiefly for the Arkenstone. Yet he had an eye for many another wonderful thing that was lying there, about which were wound old memories of the labors and the sorrows of his race. Okay, so what is going on with Thorin? It's this power that the gold has, the power that gold has, pointing at this gold, the gold upon which a dragon has long brooded, right? So something has happened to this treasure because of, or at least in connection with, the time that the dragon has lain upon it. The touch of the dragon and the possession of the dragon. Remember, there's like this slime and this stench all through the halls that the smoke and the stink of the dragon is all over it, all over the bones, moldering, mixed with the treasure, right? So this treasure, like the people of Lake Town said about the treasure that's under the water, right? That's dragon gold and gems. That's cursed. That seems to be the idea here. And the effect of touching that treasure which the dragon has owned seems to be that it causes Thorin to get this kind of single track mind, right? It's it's not just that the dragon touched it, right? What did the dragon do to get it? He killed all of Thorin's people, except for 12 others, right? Anyway, the memory is wound around the gold, right? It's like a spell that's laid on the gold. What that gold represents is the death of his people, the destruction from the dragon, the selfishness, the greed, the pride, all of that seems to now be transferred to Thorin now that he got the gold back, right? That seems to be the curse that's on this gold, is how much everyone wants it, right? It's the beauty and the quantity of the gold that makes it so great, but that same thing that makes it great, right, makes it desirable, means that people are willing to fight over it. They're willing to die, and they lose sight of the bigger picture, right? Oh, we have food for weeks. Okay, but if you want to live longer than a few weeks, right, you might want to think a little beyond that, right? Gosh, so this idea of dragon sickness, as Tolkien talks about it some places, you might have seen this other places too. Again, Tolkien didn't really, invent out of nowhere. He took this idea and he developed it and used it. This is an idea that his friend C.S. Lewis, another great writer, uses in his books, in the Narnia books, when you come to the Dawn Treader, the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. That book, depending on how you count, might be number 4, I think. Anyway, when you come to that one, you see a character, Eustace, who gets the dragon sickness also. And what happens in Eustace's case, not to spoil it, but he actually turns into a dragon. Right? So that's kind of interesting to think about. Is something like that happening here with Thorin? He's not literally, growing scales and breathing fire, but his heart, we're told, is kindled. It's fiery. He has this fire inside him, not literal, but this anger, this pride. He's not literally growing scales, but he's becoming harder skinned, harder thinking, hard-headed. He won't parley. He won't speak to the people. I will not parley, as I have said, with armed men at my gate, nor at all with the people of the Elven King, whom I remember with small kindness. In this debate they have no place. Begone now, ere our arrows fly. And if you would speak with me again, first dismiss the elvish host to the woods where it belongs, and then return, laying down your arms before you approach the threshold. The Elven King is my friend, and he has succored the people of the lake in their need, though they had no claim but friendship on him, answered Bard. We will give you time to repent your words, gather your wisdom ere we return. And then he departed and went back to the camp. So when the messengers come back, they try to talk. Then Thorin seized a bow of horn and shot an arrow at the speaker. It smote into his shield and stuck there quivering. Since such is your answer, he called in return, I declare the mountain besieged. You shall not depart from it until you call on your side for a truce and a parley. We will bear no weapons against you, but we leave you to your gold. You may eat that if you will. Ooh, good burn, right? So instead of speaking, instead of sending words and trying to figure this out, Thorin sends an arrow. And I find that really interesting, right? That's treating the people like they're dragons, right? That's how you kill dragons. That's how Bard killed the dragon with the arrow. Now Thorin is the one sending an arrow at them. Instead of trying to come to some kind of peaceful solution, he is willing to engage in war. They're not going to actually attack, right? They're just going to besiege. They'll sit down. That's what it literally means, siege, sitting, or seat, and just wait until the dwarves come to their senses, right? The word parley, just another little fun fact here. This one is, don't go too far with it, but apparently Tolkien had a hierarchy of the languages that he liked, that he thought were really good. So talking about leadership here and trying to rank the different leaders, right? Tolkien Tolkien thought about that way with language. Maybe a better idea here is that it's like a tree, right? And the part of the tree that Tolkien likes to play in and climb around and explore, Tolkien likes the best languages like Welsh and Old English and Finnish, languages that are kind of out there, kind of less popular. No one really, very few people, I won't say no one, right? But few people speak Old English anymore. But Tolkien was a master of it. He loved that stuff. He was less enthusiastic, although he knew them very well, less enthusiastic about more popular languages, the Romance languages that come from Latin, right? So particularly, the story goes that Tolkien didn't think much of French. So he doesn't dislike it, but it's just not his favorite, right? So French is where we get the word siege. It comes through French into English, and we get the word parler. Parler is just the word to speak in French. Parler, right? Parlez-vous français? Do you speak French? Parler is what they're trying to do here. And Thorin sends an arrow at them, right? So he will not parley. I just thought that was kind of funny. So little tidbits there about dragon sickness, about Tolkien and his languages that he likes and doesn't like as much. Where we leave off this chapter, Bilbo thinking the whole place still stinks of dragon. Again, literally, there's like slime and gunk from the dragon. And figuratively, metaphorically, there's still kind of this shadow of the dragon over everything here, although the dragon's dead. So we're going to look at how that plays out. Chapter 16 and 17, the big battle of the 5 armies. How does that unfold? What's going on there? Bilbo makes another very, very important choice to give away the Arkenstone. Why does he do that? What is he thinking? What is he trying to accomplish? We get an answer to our question about where Gandalf is. He finally comes back into the story now that the dragon's gone. Okay, fair enough, Gandalf. And not only that, we get yet another wonderful bit of luck. Very, very interesting coming together here. Even more so than the Black Arrow with all of those pieces that fit together to make the Black Arrow successful, right? An even bigger piece of luck here. It starts out looking like bad luck. It turns out to be good luck. So watch out for that as you're reading or reading again, whatever. Skimming over for tomorrow for the next class. Do check in online with us. Send us comments, questions, pictures you've been drawing, activities you've enjoyed. We love to hear from you, and that helps us to put on a better camp experience for you. So, signing off for now. Thank you very much for checking in, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.